This is Ann Strieber, and I have two excellent guests here today. I have Larry Flaxman, and I have Marie D. Jones, who is also one of our hosts. Hello, everybody.
Hi, good to be here.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine. Now, I'm going to talk to you about your new book, The Deja Vu Enigma, which I found particularly fascinating because I have, and I'm just going to explain this. I hope everybody will forgive me for this, doing all the talking. But I have had very interesting experiences with deja vu. Extreme deja vu experiences in my life, which is one reason I was so interested in this book. When I was a troubled adolescent, I had what doctors then diagnosed as petit mal seizures, which I have now had several tests, and I do not have epilepsy. They had misdiagnosed it. But what is one of the symptoms of this is an extreme, scary feeling of deja vu.
Right.
And now I have, ever since coming out of the hospital, I now have occasionally what I call fear feelings. There's a type of anxiety attack, and my neurologist said, well, what that is there's a lot of stuff you don't remember, but your unconscious does remember, and all of a sudden you get nervous about it.
Right.
And this also brings out scary feelings of deja vu. And, you know, deja vu, the song, da-da-da-da-da, everybody thinks, oh, well, deja vu, that's nice, but it's not always. It can be very frightening. So I wanted to start with the page 24, the couple who went to Greece for the first time and felt they had been there before, and they were sure they had been there before. And I thought, this must have been scary. I mean, this must have been really scary. Here you go on vacation, and you say, wait a minute, am I losing my mind? Have I got amnesia? To tell that story, one of you. It's fascinating.
Well, this is actually a story that we use to show a very typical deja vu experience. And, you know, basically a man and his wife decide to go on vacation to de-stress, and they go to Greece, and they're standing outside, I believe it's the Parthenon or some, you know, one of the great temples in Greece, and he has this tremendous feeling that he's been there before.
But he hasn't.
That's very typical. But you know, he couldn't remember ever having been there. But what we found is that most people that have deja vu, they don't necessarily associate it with something fearful. It's just disturbing because, you know, you can't stop it. You can't make it happen. You don't know why it's happening.
You know, Whitley has always had memories of living a past life in ancient Rome, and I believe one of the things that makes him believable is that he was not an emperor. He remembers being a slave, and that's, you know, most people who have these type of grandiose memories of the past are always, you were always royalty. I don't think there was ever that much royalty in the world, but anyway.
Exactly, huh?
But he has this, I mean, he's fascinated by ancient Rome, and when we went to Rome for the first time, he walked around the ruins of Rome, which, of course, right in the middle of the city, and he was just open-mouthed. It was like he was in some sort of trance. Mm-hmm. And so I want to put this to you, one explanation you did not give for this man's experience in Greece. Was it in a past life?
Deja vu is a different phenomenon. What we found is that the people that are doing deja vu research are very insistent about keeping it separate from what might be a past life recall. Because deja vu traditionally is having a memory of something that's happening in the present moment. So we had a lot of people sending stories and telling us stories about, you know, being somewhere and then seeing themselves in the past. And what that is, it's sort of a hybrid deja vu where you're combining the sensation of having been there or done something before with a past life recall. And so that's why we had to keep it separate. In the deja vu chapter, we kept that very separate. But I do believe we talk about past life recollection later in the book. Because not everybody has that past life connection.
I think a lot of people don't remember it. Certainly, I don't know if I believe, quote unquote, in reincarnation, but we've had a lot of people on, authors and people, and serious scientists, and there's a lot of evidence for it. Doesn't sound likely, but
because it's subjective. You know, it's not something that you can show on paper, so to speak. So naturally, the scientific community sort of sweeps it under the rug, and like they do with a lot of quote-unquote paranormal phenomena.
And I always say that this is circumstantial evidence, but you can convict a murderer on circumstantial evidence. So why is this so hard for scientists to accept? They've got to have something that they can go to a laboratory and cook up or something. What do you think? Larry, you got an idea about that?
Well, I do. I think, it's very difficult to apply the scientific method to a lot of these things, and it's really difficult to find that quantitative black or white answer for a lot of these phenomena. So I think you're absolutely right. Science really has not taken that keen of an interest in those type of topics, specifically because of those reasons. That it's very, very difficult to get a complete analysis of it with any type of legitimate hypothesis. And it's unfortunate because there are so many people that are so interested in this, and of course this is such a prevailing thing that it really would make sense that people would take it a little bit more serious. But unfortunately, like the UFO community, they don't. There's a lot of people also, unfortunately, that are in the field actually doing some of the work that tend to delegitimize, I think, a lot of that as well. I know in the paranormal community, it's absolutely rife with drama. There's all kinds of backbiting and all kinds of things that go on behind the scenes. It's really unfortunate, but that tends to really put a sour opinion in many people's mouths about that. That they automatically assume that the entire field is tainted just based on that one experience.
Well, in his book Confirmation, Whitley interviewed Monsignor Balducci, who recently died, and he said, we started a whole religion basically on the testimony of a few people.
Exactly.
On circumstantial evidence.
Right, yeah.
And I thought that
experience.
Yeah, and I thought now that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, I think it's like politics. Are you ever going to have the red and the blue come together? And I think science and the other side, whatever you want to call it, metaphysical, paranormal, spiritual, I do, and Larry and I talk about this all the time, and there are positive signs that it's getting better, but I think there's always going to be those diehards that do not want that gap to be ever closed, because maybe they'll lose their identity, or maybe they'll be proven wrong, and we all know how nobody wants to be wrong.
Well, I'm going to say something really controversial, and then we'll get a lot of letters about it, but that's fun. But anyway, I always thought, and actually this is Whitley's theory too, that, the races, blacks and whites, they're coming together more. Blacks are entering the middle class, and we're all very relieved. We're so tired of the other thing, and of course they are too. But we notice that there's a lot of the black leadership, political leadership, tries to be divisive. Chris Rock is one of the comedians who laughs at this. He makes a lot of good points at this. He says, what is all this? Blackness, cut it out. And he's a black comedian, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know. But Whitley thinks it's because these people are not competent enough to be leaders if they have a wider constituency. In other words, they're not first class, so what they're doing is they're pandering. And I think a lot of these UFO people are doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I
they
think
couldn't
there's
make
a loss
it.
of identity. If you have a set identity of who you are, and if who you are is, whether it's a black activist or a Latino activist or a white activist or white supremacist, to be threatened by the loss of that identity, I think for most people, they can't handle it.
They can't stand up to the science.
Or they'll hang on to an ideology that is so outdated just because they don't want to lose the complete foundation of who they are. And I saw that in the UFO community too, way back when, people hanging on to ideas that were so outdated.
Or they're scientifically invalid.
Right, because they had kind of made their quote-unquote mark on the world with that idea. So maybe they've come along by now, I don't know. But, I definitely think it's competency and identity. Those are the two keys.
Well, we're going to take a break real soon, but one thing I'm going to do is throw out a phrase to you, which is what the science is that is going to unite the paranormal and the bean counter scientists. And it is 2 words. But we don't need to discuss it anymore because it's not what your book is about. 2 words. Quantum physics.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we threw some of that in the book.
Yep. You do. Well, there is some in there. Okay, we'll be right back.
Earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, strange changes on the sun, disasters natural and man-made. When will it end? Or will it end? Whitley Strieber explores these questions in his new book, The Omega Point. Best-selling author Larry Bond says Whitley Strieber wraps mind-bending principles inside an apocalyptic mystery. The story is one of both disaster and hope. As the unthinkable happens, follow the extraordinary journey to the Omega Point as mankind struggles to transcend the end of the world. Discover the true power of good and evil in a time of great danger. The Omega Point. There is a plan for us.
This is Ann Strieber, and I'm back with Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman, and we are discussing their wonderful new book, The Deja Vu Enigma. And it is an enigma, although we're going to try to bring some clarity to it with this Dreamland interview. Now, one thing you have, which you mentioned page 34, DID, multiple identity disorder, which is what used to be called multiple personalities.
Right.
They have new names for everything these days. Like manic depression is now bipolar and things of that sort. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to throw something out at you because we have a lot of people interested in UFOs or actual contactees in our audience. And I think that this might be what counts for the phenomenon of missing time that is very common among contactees, because I know that people with multiple personalities, one of the ways that psychiatrists say that, they diagnose these people is these people say, well, I was walking along and suddenly I found myself someplace and I didn't know how I got there. And of course what it was another of the personalities was one who went there.
Right.
Then the main personality woke up and found themselves there. And I wonder what you think about that in light of your book and in light of Deja Vu. Anybody want to tackle that?
I've had an experience
go ahead,
myself.
Larry.
Oh, Larry, tell me.
Yeah, I've had an experience exactly of that nature.
Of missing time.
Of missing time, yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it was a group of us. There was 6 people in our group that all experienced it at the exact same time. We have no explanation for how that occurred. So it wasn't just, me having the experience, but all of us at the same time having the experience, which completely...
These are usually group experiences. These are usually done in group, but go ahead.
Well, we were doing an investigation at a outdoor location, and...
Was this ghost hunting?
Yeah, it was a ghost hunt, yeah. Really, it was, I wouldn't call it a ghost hunt so much as I would an anomalous light reporting.
I love that. Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, there's, like many towns, there's reports of lights appearing over railroad tracks in the middle of the boondocks. So this was very similar to. We went out to go check the place out, and we parked in on a very large dirt cutout in the forest. Very large place, very easy to access the railroad tracks from here. We were able to fit in 6 vehicles in this place. So, I mean, it's a pretty good sized place. We walked down the tracks about 2 miles. We did see the lights. This was in the early evening. We did see the lights. I think there's a completely rational scientific explanation for it, but we did see the lights.
This wasn't Marfa, Texas, was it?
Late.
This wasn't Marfa, Texas, was it?
No, but it's very the fundamental. It was the same phenomenology as Marfa lights, or there's many other lights around the country that are the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. A lot of legend and folklore basically about the same thing about the railroad conductor's head being cut off, and he's swinging his lamp from side to side basically to try to find his head. You know, you find those urban ghost tales in many, many places, and this was similar to that. So we walked down the tracks about 2 miles. We were there for a couple hours just checking out the lights, having fun, trying to figure out what it was. And we decided it was getting late. It was time to wrap up for the evening. So all of us gathered up our stuff. We start walking back. And now it took us probably maybe 2 hours to get down to the location on the tracks where we were. And we start walking. We're walking and walking and walking. And pretty soon it's 4 hours later and we still haven't reached the cars. Well, next thing we know, we look at our watches. It's 4 hours later. We're at the very end of the railroad tracks, way past on the other side of where our vehicles were. We completely missed the vehicles, which would have been impossible to see 6 vehicles out in this clear-cut area under very, very bright moonlit conditions. So we all missed it, and you know, it took us a good 2 hours to walk back from where we were all the way back to the vehicles. So, you know, there's basically 2 hours of time are completely missing. And how we got to the end of the tracks, how we missed the vehicles, I mean, it's all a complete mystery, and I have no explanation for it. But there were 6 of us that experienced it. To this day, I'm a stout believer in the possibility of missing time completely.
Well, anybody listening to this, as I say, a lot of our audience will be jumping up and down in their seats and saying, wait a minute, those weren't lights, those were Marfa lights, those were UFOs. It's you know.
Well, actually, let me add this too. There have been a lot of reports, and actually the MUFON database contains reports of folks that have seen UFO-type phenomena in the same area that we were. So I talked to a lady that actually supposedly, now I don't know, I say supposedly because she seemed legit. Of course, as you know, that doesn't mean a whole lot. That actually believes that she saw some type of a craft there. So, you know, absolutely that's a possibility. Sure, maybe we got abducted by aliens. I don't know. I have no explanation for what happened, but you know, all I know is 2 hours of my time, 2 hours of my life are completely gone, and I have no explanation for what happened.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, here we have somebody. Now, Larry, I did not know. Okay. You've been keeping that secret from us here. And add the tea.
There's very few people that actually know that story just simply because of the fact that I'm a scientist and I don't have any quantifiable evidence to back up what happened. But there were 6 of us that all experienced the same thing. We all talked about it afterwards. We couldn't figure out what had happened. So, you know, really, was an extraterrestrial intervention? I don't know. Was it, you know, simply that we were tired, we were hot? Maybe. But, you know, how do you explain 6 people completely missing those vehicles out under complete optimal conditions that with the moonlight? We would have seen the cars. We would have not ended up at the other end of the tracks completely. And, you know, the 2 hours that it took to get to from the vehicles or from the end of the tracks back to the vehicles, I don't have any recollection even of that thing. Next thing I knew, I was back in my car and back on the way home to Little Rock. So, you know, it was just going back through the timeline trying to figure it out that we even discovered that there were those 2 hours that were missing. So there was, you know, a lot of it is completely unexplainable. Are there possibilities of what it was that was, you know, completely rational from a scientific perspective? Absolutely. But as far as I'm concerned, there is as many unexplainable variables in that little equation as there are explainable. So a very cool experience. I just haven't shared that with a lot of people because how do you explain to a fellow scientist, well, I'm not sure what happened to me, but there's 2 hours of my time that are completely gone. We all experienced it.
You know, I'm glad you shared it with us. I really am.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting is we know scientists, and I mean top scientists, people working on nanotubes and private spacecraft and things of that sort, who are becoming more and more open to the idea of contact, of alien contact, whatever it is. They, you know, being a lot of them in the space industry, and they know it's not, you know, spacemen from Sirius. They think it's, you know, people from parallel universes or something. But I mean, there's one person we know who we actually interviewed anonymously who got information on how to save a dying satellite that was launched by another country from the visitors. And we all just had a nice dinner with someone who is going to take us on a tour of their their private spacecraft company, which does a lot of work for NASA, and Marie and I are probably going to go together. And he's very open to this.
I want to go.
He's very open to this.
I want to
Larry,
go.
I told you, fly out and you can come.
He's very open to this. But anyway, I think let me see what time. Is it about time to take a break? I think it is. We'll take a break, and then I want to come back and say, I think what's going on here with all this deja vu is the same thing that goes on when people take iboga or hallucinogenic drugs. I think that somehow they are going into a parallel universe. And you mentioned the DMT experiments by Rick Strassman, who is someone we know and who is we've interviewed before. And we've met him, too. Lucky. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to Whitley Strieber's Dreamland with expert host Ann Strieber.
And we're back with Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman, and we're talking about their book, The Deja Vu Enigma. And this is maybe an enigma to them, and it's not so much of an enigma to UFO experiencers and contactees and abductees, although I think it's just as puzzling, and maybe they'll get some explanations here. Hi, guys. You back?
We're here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're here.
Now, it seems to me that the most likely, oh, by the way, Larry, Starfire Tour will be with us for a subscriber interview with Marie, and she'll say that missing time experience you talked about is a time slip, and this would be very interesting. But anyway, it seems to me that the most likely explanation for deja vu is parallel universes. I mean, you go into a parallel universe, which is only slightly different from the one you're in.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, there's a lot of scientists say, we can't do that. But I think that that's who the visitors are. I think they're coming from parallel universes, and they're basically saying, cut out, or they could be time travelers. I think what it is they're coming, we're mucking up their future with our, climate change and nuclear ambitions and things and oil spills, and they're saying, cut it out. Cut it out, because people are getting a lot of John Mack, the late John Mack, a lot of the people he talked to had gotten messages about climate change and warnings of ecological disasters, and I think they're trying to get us to stop messing up their present. Who thinks they might be coming from parallel universes?
We explore that because there's two different sides to this story, and deja vu is sort of the poster child for this ongoing war between. This is a purely brain-induced phenomenon. The temporal lobe is somehow being stimulated to create a sensation of familiarity. It's all memory-driven, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the fence, and this was hard for Larry and I because even though we love these theories, we had to make sure we balanced it with what was going on in the scientific community. But yes, the theories are there are other dimensions, there are other universes. If we, as many physicists tell us, exist in many, if not all of these universes, obviously there's one where we would be doing the very same thing at the very same moment that we are in this universe, Universe A, if you want to call it.
But slightly differently. If it's a many worlds theory, yeah.
And to open up that theory, of course, every kind of paranormal phenomenon could be explained by that. The idea that there are, we call it the grid. There's just a sort of grid-like structure of different realities and different levels and connectors between those levels. And some things come to us, and maybe when we dream or when we have a precognition or we have deja vu or whatever, we're going to their level.
What's the scientists say?
Science hasn't outright come out and embraced the possibility, but certainly there's enough possibilities with M theory, some string theory stuff. Quantum physics really does lay the groundwork for having multiple dimensions or multiple realities that are present. If you've ever read anything about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle or Schrodinger's cat, I mean, a lot of those things really speak to the possibility that there are alternate realities or dimensions that we exist in.
Well, with the Heisenberg, nothing is really real until it's fixed into a measurable position, which means anything is possible depending on who is doing the measuring, I guess you could say.
The observer creates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what's to say that their observation is the one and only? It's only one potentiality out of, I would say, an infinite
and what if the
number of
observation is
potentialities.
actually, the observation could be occurring in another reality or another dimension as well?
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
the observation of something, basically, it boils down to the observation of something you believe is what makes it come to fruition, or that changes the outcome and it splits off to an alternate reality. What if the observation of whatever it is that's being observed isn't us, per se, that's observing it, but it's something else from another dimension? So, science, there's a lot of different... There's just so much unknown. There's so much possibilities. There's so much, in the grand scheme of things, there's so little that science truly does know that's black and white. There are a lot of things that are outside of our physical capabilities that they're so theoretical that there's really anything is possible. That's the taking point from my blabbering on here, is that really anything is possible.
Well, it's interesting that the people who take I wanted to say real quick that this is another case of hard science and paranormal coming together. Mm-hmm. Because I've always said to people, quantum physics actually is a proof for God, because if the Big Bang happened, somebody had to be there to see it, or else it didn't happen. And right. Who was that somebody? She was there. I remember we talked to Terence McKenna one time. He's no longer alive. He said, and other people have told me who do meditating in Eastern religions and things like this, and he said this. He said, whenever I take those darn mushrooms, he said, I go back and I see the same beings.
Right. The same.
And they would continue the conversation. We started like we stopped in the middle of last time, no matter how long it's been between mushrooms. Mm-hmm. And I know that people of certain religions say that they know that other people in the same religion, same sect, right, see the same beings when they do their meditations or whatever, or maybe they take some augmenting drugs. And I know that Rick Strassman's DMT test, people saw the same beings.
Right.
But they were lying on separate gurneys and not communicating with each other. So, now this is real deja vu. I mean, and you touch on this. So come on, tell us more about this. This is exciting.
Well, it's funny because Rick Strassman said that in his DMT experiments, deja vu was sort of an afterthought, that they found a lot of their a lot of their
participants.
There you go. That's the word. Had a deja vu experience when they stimulated the temporal lobe, or they gave them extra DMT, because we have DMT in our bodies in very small quantities. So it's like an increase in DMT.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh.
Stimulation, very small. So what's going on here? If a lot of people are having these experiences, could it be that something is stimulating the release of DMT into the brain and causing us to have these sort of archetypal collective visions or experiences? And I love, Larry turned me on to Graham Hancock's book, Supernatural.
Oh, I was just going to mention that. It's, because we are so paranoid about drugs in this country, you could barely get a publisher here, but it's one of the most wonderful, I think Disinformation Press finally published it. They had the guts to do it, but it's one of the most wonderful books I ever read. It's called Supernatural by Graham Hancock, and you can get it by finding it on Amazon, folks. It's fabulous. And he took Iboga under a doctor, with the doctor sitting there the whole time. So it wasn't like, he's not talking about his getting high experiences. He's talking about a scientific experiment. Go ahead.
Well, it's possible that a drug or, one of these hallucinogens simply opens a part of the brain that is normally dormant or inactive, whatever you want to say. But that we all have that capacity to experience those things if that part of the brain were opened. Rick Strassman was saying that DMT could elicit a certain state of consciousness that we're not normally in our waking state.
Do you think it's right brain, left brain? Did you get into the right brain more?
We do get into that a little bit, about how when the left brain is shut down, the right brain becomes far more active, and there's a lot more experiential, subjective the stuff that goes on, psychic ability, creative, imaginative abilities, and we are a very left brain culture, and maybe that's one of the reasons why, the scientific community doesn't want to quite accept the right brain culture, because it would totally turn everything we know on its head.
Well, as most of the people who are listening to this know, when I had a burst aneurysm in my brain 5 years ago, I was psychic afterwards for a while. And it was a very interesting experience. And I think that's what happened to me, that somehow that natural DMT got activated. I got more into my right brain because the injury happened on the left brain. And I had some very definite psychic hits, and I have never been a person who was into that in any way.
Right.
And that to me was real, interesting, circumstantial evidence.
Yeah. It's like savant syndrome.
Oh, yes.
We all have brains. Why is it that certain people are able to have a particular part of their brain be so active, enable them to play piano by ear and learn 7 languages in a day, and yet we say, well, that's not something we can all do. Well, maybe it is. We're just not all having that part of the brain activated in the same way.
Well, I also wonder if deja vu, this is something I don't think you touch on, although I may be wrong, that, Jung, the psychoanalyst, one of the, along with Freud, one of the founders of psychoanalysis, thought there might be a group mind. I was very interested in reading a novel recently called Day for Night, which is a fascinating book by Frederick Reichen, and it's a novel. But
right.
In it, one of the characters remembers almost word for word an experience that Whitley had as a child and has talked about in several interviews recently that subscribers can still listen to about child abuse. And it was almost exactly the same thing. Now, he had to have written this book quite a while before Whitley produced these Dreamland interviews. And I just don't think he got them from us.
Mm-hmm.
So this is of the group mind. I mean, that would explain deja vu, but what does group mind mean? I mean, it's a fascinating idea.
Well,
somebody talk about it here.
We have a whole chapter on groupthink, hysteria, collective belief.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yeah, and because to us that again was a mind anomaly that is so misunderstood and yet so fascinating. And if you look at our world today, it's such a part of who we are as a species, this idea of groupthink, sheeple, some people like to call it, collective experience. What's up with that? The fact that you can think come up with the same idea at the same time 10 other people do, and nobody's come up with it before then.
Rupert Sheldrake, the scientist, we've met him. He's a fascinating person. He thinks ideas are kind of in the air. So deja vu could be evidence of a group mind?
I'm not sure about group mind, but maybe, again, tapping into that collective, the 0-point field or the grid or whatever that collective is, and having a similar experience. I don't know, time travel, if the collective includes past, present, and future. Obviously, you could have any kind of time slip or time travel experience that there is.
Oh, you talked to Starfire about that. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Well, and you mentioned out-of-body experiences, too. Mm-hmm. And Whitley has gone to the Monroe Institute, and he did it when Robert Monroe was alive. He was lucky to go at that period. This is in Virginia. And Marla Fries, one of our hosts, she's a psychic medium. She's planning on going in September. And they seem to trigger these with noise, with what they call hemisync noises, and they sell these tapes. And then
I actually have.
You have some?
I've actually got the series from them. I've got the whole CD series from them.
Have you tried it?
I've delved a little bit into it. I mean, I'm a big advocate or a big fan of binaural beat technology and some of the things that Monroe and also the what's the other one? There's the Monroe Institute, and then there's another one that was pretty groundbreaking with that as well. And I cannot think of the other name.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's HoloSync and there's HemiSync. There's two different ones, but I've tried it. I've not had any kind of extensive, out of body experience or astral travel or anything like that, but certainly it helps to make one more focused, a lot more relaxed. But
I wonder if it stimulates the right side of the brain to get the left side to shut up. What do you think?
Maybe. Maybe. I'm not sure exactly what parts of the brain that it specifically targets, but it's basically sending two signals. The technology revolves around sending two signals to the brain that are offset from each other by a certain number of degrees. And then your brain naturally takes those two frequencies and blends it into one. And then that one frequency apparently can do what they call entrain your brain to achieve certain states, like alpha, delta, beta state, whatever.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the gamma wave state, which is what you're aiming for, isn't it? I think the gamma wave state is the paranormal. Yeah, go ahead.
There's different states. But there's different states that are associated with different types of conscious behavior. There's like relaxation state. There's concentration of focus state, and I believe that's what the aim and the intention of the HoloSync and the HemiSync technology stuff is that they help by targeting those specific brainwave frequencies that they're trying to put you into those states of mind or states of concentration. I know the one that I listened to was a creativity one that helps to stimulate creativity by targeting a specific brainwave frequency and doing that. And I can't really say that I was any more creative than beforehand, but certainly it was an interesting experience.
Well, I once interviewed somebody, he was about finding God in the brain, and he was saying that he wrote this with a neurologist, and he was saying that there are different wave states in the brain at the same time. We're not just in one or the other. It's kind of like, which one are we going to listen to?
Right, the most prominent.
Yeah, that's right. The brain tends to fluctuate between different,
Well, I wonder what the different wave states in the brain might have to do with deja vu, if anything. I mean, are you tuning into a brainwave that is traveling to a parallel universe, and then you go back to your regular old daily life and your daily multiple personality, your regular old personality? I mean, are we much more complex than we think?
I think so. I don't think we even understand our own minds. Larry and I say that's the final frontier, is the human mind. Yeah. Consciousness, thought, intention.
No, and you have a perfect point with that. It is, and you have a perfect point. Are these brainwave signals, are they somehow opening up a gateway or a pathway to us being able to be receptive to these other realities or dimensions that may possibly exist? Yeah, that's exactly right. Maria and I have talked a lot about how we believe that the brain not only creates reality, but it also receives reality, that the brain may, be acting as a type of radio receiver for a lot of those external type events like that.
And I think that people who have, and I talked about this some at the Dreamland Festival, people who have anomalous experiences, UFO experiences, not only did often something happen to them in childhood, sometimes the same thing that causes multiple personalities, some kind of sexual childhood abuse, or some sort of kind of shock, traumatic shock, that opens them up to this, to be able to see this sort of thing. But also somehow they are people who can remember this and tune into it. And, I'm not quite sure. They're different somehow, and they know they're different, and they feel different. And in this case, it's not deja vu. Anybody want to say anything about that?
I just think extreme trauma, can definitely stimulate parts of the brain that may not normal. I mean, when you're in a state of extreme trauma, your brain is releasing much different chemicals than someone who's in just a normal everyday state. So obviously I think it changes you, not just psychologically, but physiologically as well. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why you do hear about that. People who have been sexually abused or physically abused as children, emotionally abused, often grow up with a different perception, a different conscious awareness of their surroundings. And it's obviously driven from the experience that they had, but perhaps also the different chemicals and the different things that were going on in the brain that shifted for them that may not do that for anyone else. I think people who have a near-death experience are going through something similar.
Oh, yes.
Their brains are doing something that we don't normally do unless you have a very traumatic experience like that.
Well, I had an interesting near-death experience that our listeners all know about, I'm sure. But, and, you know, it's interesting. People say, well, this is the truth. I discovered the truth. But there are probably many truths. What do you think?
I don't know if we're ever going to know any of them. But, who's to say that fact is ever fact? I mean, how many facts have we disproven over the years as knowledge increases? And who's to say that the truth that you come to is the same truth that I or Larry might come to? And then is there a collective truth?
And so many people describe, you know, a group of people sitting on a couch, one person taken, one person abducted, everybody else just sitting there. A group of people. Now, Larry, your missing time experience, everybody experienced it, but it's so often that one person experiences it, two people experience it, the rest of the people never experienced it. So they're definitely different realities, and it doesn't mean that these people are making it up or hallucinating or whatever. They're different realities, and
exactly.
I just wonder if deja vu isn't our memory of some of those realities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, we've come to the end of our show, and I don't know if we've gotten any answers, but we've probed a lot of questions.
That's always what happens when we write books. Larry and I throw it out there, and it just makes more questions. But I think that's the quest, and that's what makes it so.
Well, the quest is what's fun. That's what's fun. Yeah. And keeping the question open, because then you can keep questing.
And like you said, maybe everything that we are talking about is real. Maybe there are all these truths. That deja vu is 5, 6, 7 different things.
So the question is,
who's experiencing it.
So the question is, can we choose which reality to be in? Because, you know, if things are going badly, we'll pick a better one. Okay. It's nice to talk to you folks. I really enjoyed it. Of deja vu. And, you know, deja vu, the song, da, 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 everybody thinks, oh, well, deja vu, that's nice, but it's not always. It can be very frightening. So, I wanted to start with the page 24, the couple who went to Greece for the first time and felt they had been there before, and they were sure they had been there before. And I thought, this must have been scary. I mean, this must have been really scary. Here you go on vacation, and you say, wait a minute, am I losing my mind? What, have I got amnesia? To tell that story, one of you. It's fascinating.
Well, this is actually a story that we use to show a very typical deja vu experience. And, you know, basically a man and his wife decide to go on vacation to de-stress, and they go to Greece, and they're standing outside, I believe it's the Parthenon or some, you know, one of the great temples in Greece, and he has this tremendous feeling that he's been there before.
But he hasn't.
That's very typical. But you know, he couldn't remember ever having been there. But what we found is that most people that have deja vu, they don't necessarily associate it with something fearful. It's just disturbing because, you know, you can't stop it. You can't make it happen. You don't know why it's happening.
You know, Whitley has always had memories of living a past life in ancient Rome. And I believe, one of the things that makes him believable is that he was not an emperor. He remembers being, this is Ann Strieber. And I have two excellent guests here today. I have Larry Flaxman and I have Marie D. Jones, who is also one of our hosts. Hello, everybody.
Hi, good to be here.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine. Now, I'm going to talk to you about your new book, The Deja Vu Enigma, which I found particularly fascinating because I have, and I'm just going to explain this. I hope everybody will forgive me for this, doing all the talking. But I have had very interesting experiences with deja vu. extreme deja vu experiences in my life, which is one reason I was so interested in this book. When I was a troubled adolescent, I had what doctors then diagnosed as petit mal seizures, which I have now had several tests, and I do not have epilepsy. They had misdiagnosed it. But what is one of the symptoms of this is an extreme, scary feeling of deja vu.
Right, right.
And now I have, ever since coming out of the hospital, I now have occasionally what I call fear feelings. There's a type of anxiety attack, and my neurologist said, well, what that is there's a lot of stuff you don't remember, but your unconscious does remember, and all of a sudden you get nervous about it.
Right.
And this also brings out scary feeling, a slave, and that's, most people who have these type of grandiose memories of the past you were always royalty. I don't think there was ever that much royalty in the world, but anyway.
Exactly, huh?
But he has this, he's fascinated by ancient Rome, and when we went to Rome for the first time, he walked around the ruins of Rome, which of course right in the middle of the city, and he was just open-mouthed. It was like he was in some sort of trance. Mm-hmm. And so I want to put this to you, one explanation you did not give for this man's experience in Greece. Was it in a past life?
Deja vu is a different phenomenon. What we found is that the people that are doing deja vu research are very insistent about keeping it separate from what might be a past life recall. Because deja vu traditionally is having a memory of something that's happening in the present moment. So we had a lot of people sending stories and telling us stories about, being somewhere and then seeing themselves in the past. And what that is, it's sort of a hybrid deja vu where you're combining the sensation of having been there or done something before with a past life recall. And so that's why we had to keep it separate. In the deja vu chapter, we kept that very separate. But I do believe we talk about past life recollection later in the book. Because not everybody has that past life connection.
I think a lot of people don't remember it. Certainly, I don't know if I believe, quote unquote, in reincarnation, but we've had a lot of people on, authors and people, and serious scientists, and there's a lot of evidence for it. Doesn't sound likely, but
because it's subjective. It's not something that you can show on paper, so to speak. So naturally, the scientific community sort of sweeps it under the rug, and like they do with a lot of quote-unquote paranormal phenomena.
And I always say that this is circumstantial evidence, but you can convict a murderer on circumstantial evidence. So why is this so hard for scientists to accept? They've got to have something that they can go to a laboratory and cook up or something. What do you think? Larry, you got an idea about that?
Well, I do. I think, it's very difficult to apply the scientific method to a lot of these things, and it's really difficult to find that quantitative black or white answer for a lot of these phenomena. So I think you're absolutely right. Science really has not taken that keen of an interest in those type of topics, specifically because of those reasons. That it's very, very difficult to get a complete analysis of it with any type of legitimate hypothesis. And it's unfortunate because, there are so many people that are so interested in this, and of course this is such a prevailing thing that, it really would make sense that people would take it a little bit more serious. But unfortunately, like the UFO community, they don't. There's a lot of people also, unfortunately, that are in the field actually doing some of the work that tend to delegitimize, I think, a lot of that as well. I know in the paranormal community, it's absolutely rife with drama. There's all kinds of backbiting and all kinds of things that go on behind the scenes. It's really unfortunate, but that tends to really put a sour opinion in many people's mouths about that. That they automatically assume that the entire field is tainted just based on that one experience.
Well, in his book Confirmation, Whitley interviewed Monsignor Balducci, who recently died, and he said, we started a whole religion basically on the testimony of a few people.
Exactly.
On circumstantial evidence.
Right, yeah.
And I thought that
experience.
Yeah, and I thought, now that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, I think it's like politics. Are you ever going to have the red and the blue come together? And I think science and the other side, whatever you want to call it, metaphysical, paranormal, spiritual, and Larry and I talk about this all the time, and there are positive signs that it's getting better, but I think there's always going to be those diehards that do not want that gap to be ever closed, because maybe they'll lose their identity, or maybe they'll be proven wrong, and we all know how nobody wants to be wrong.
Well, I'm going to say something really controversial, and then we'll